Time for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Dr. Yang, thank you for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Well, last week the markets were hit by some uncertainty about the supposed deal reached by China and the U.S. and by a major slowdown in China's GDP growth. With that in mind and the potential spillover into global growth, how are the markets today?
Okay, well, the markets today were okay, but the entire last week, it has, especially the latter part of the week, it has been somewhat unstable. China has revealed its third quarter growth rate, and it was 6%, which was below the expectations of 6.1%. It's the lowest growth rate since the China announced quarterly dates from 1992. Now, this 6.0% is still within Chinese government's target range of 6 to 6.5%, but it's at the lower end of the scale. And a lot of analysts do not believe the Chinese published numbers. They think that the actual figures are lower, so in the 5% range. And the stock market, I think, is reflecting that type of uncertainty. Virtually all markets were at the beginning of last week, it rose because they thought, well, the Chinese U.S.-China trade war perhaps was in remission, but then it was revealed that some of the details were not as set as President Trump tweeted to be. So we had a lot of somewhat uncertainty toward the end of the week, though they weren't too major, but still we had a lot of ups and downs. And in the European markets, we had problems with Brexit as well. So right now it seems like Brexit is working itself out. But still, I think the stock market is reflecting a lot of uncertainty because of not only the trade wars, but Chinese low growth.
Yeah, and then another front on the trade issue is, well, last Friday, the U.S. starting to impose tariffs on EU products worth $7.5 billion. And the EU says it'll impose its own tariffs in due course. What stands out to you in these tariffs?
Okay, well, this was a result of a WTO case which began in 2004 dealing with subsidies to airplane manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus. Now, this particular $7.5 billion retaliation was a retaliation that was authorized by WTO because the EU failed to withdraw illegal subsidies to Airbus that the European governments made for A380 super jumbo jets and A350 mid-size airliners. U.S. originally asked for $11 billion, but WTO only authorized $7.5 billion. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that this was a suit and a countersuit. U.S. Put a case against Europe for subsidies to Airbus, but almost at the same time, the EU put case against U.S. for subsidies to Boeing. And the Boeing case, it's due. The WTO is due to decide on what retaliations that they can take in a few months. So in this case, both U.S. and EU, in effect, lost. And in a sense, they're putting retaliation against each other for very similar type of incident. They're both giving illegal subsidies to their favored airplane manufacturers. So it's a very strange situation, but in a very monopolistic industry with national champion implications like Airbus and Boeing, this is somewhat inevitable, and this has been a long-running case. As I mentioned, this case started in 2004, and political arguments went back even further back. So in a sense, this retaliation is somewhat understandable, but it really comes at a very bad time because U.S. and EU trading relationship is not very good right now because, well, U.S. has imposed tariffs on European steel, and Europe, in retaliation, had put tariffs on American goods, and this will just make the problem worse.
Very interesting case indeed. Well, real quickly before we go, we're expecting data from the BOK on third quarter productivity in Korea. What else is coming up this week?
Okay, well, the most important thing is the third quarter GDP growth. The third quarter GDP growth has to be above 0.6% if we want to achieve somewhere around 2% growth, but there's a good chance that it will not even make 0.6%. Other interesting things that are coming up in the week, National Assembly audit will take place for Financial Supervisory Services and Financial Services Commission, Ministry of Economy and Finance, BOK, and Export-Import Bank between the 21st and the 24th. Producers' Price Index will come out on the 22nd, so we'll see how bad the negative price growth trend is. And then an interesting announcement will be made on the 25th on whether the Korean government will decide whether Korea should maintain its WTO status, whether it should remain a developing country or whether it should declare itself to be an advanced country. Korea has gotten a lot of diplomatic pressure to declare itself an advanced country, but because of the agricultural concerns, politically, Korea must try to maintain itself as a developing country, and it'll be interesting to see what the government decides.
It sure will. All right, Dr. Young, that's where we'll have to leave it today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.